Hello. Welcome to another edition of Friday Reads. This is Lindy and my channel is Lindy's Magpie Reads. I'm glad you found me. So what I've done in the past week, the bookish things, I went to a couple of independent bookstores last Saturday to celebrate Indie Bookstore Day, and I've got a video about that I will link down below. I attended a couple of Edmonton Poetry Festival events. So good to hear poetry live. I appreciate online events, but there's just nothing like going there in person. Yeah. Anyway, in the past week, I have finished 9 books. One of those was a picture book, 3 were graphic novels, and 2 were audiobooks. 2 of them were LA Times Book Prize winners. 2 were short story collections, 2 were poetry collections, 2 are by Asian authors, #Asian Readathon this month, 3 by Canadian authors, 3 by members of the African diaspora, 1 by an Indigenous storyteller, and 3 by queer authors. All right, so I'm saving the best for last. This first one is excellent too. So, fiction award winner for the LA Times Book Prize. It's called In the Company of Men by Veronique Tadjo. She translated it from French herself in collaboration with John Cullen. She said a native speaker helped her to make sure and get the dialogue natural sounding. This is a polyphonic, kind of a fable of a novel. So each short chapter is from different viewpoints, and this is based on true accounts from the Ebola outbreak between 2014 and 2016 in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. There are nurses, doctors, gravediggers, patients, and not only human voices, there's animals, the Ebola virus itself, and also a tree, a baobab tree. I actually prefer the British cover for this. I think I will pop it in. Of course, because of COVID, this really hits home. The author wrote this, and it was first published in 2017, although it just came out in English last year and very timely for COVID. And the dedication in the beginning, she dedicates it to the victims in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, for all those whom Ebola has touched, whether directly or indirectly. In other words, for all us human beings. Yeah. So many great passages in here, but I think the one that I'll remember the most is by a volunteer, I think she was from Europe, who a month after she was declared free of the virus, it returned, and it had lodged itself in her eye. So instead of being blue, her left eye was green, where the virus was kind of like hiding from her immune system. Ebola is so contagious that simply touching someone else, you were likely to catch the virus. And so it's absolutely remarkable that they were able to contain it, within 2 years. It required so much cooperation. I hope that between that and what we've experienced in COVID, that we've learned something. Yeah, there are statistics at the end. Something like over 28,000 people were infected by Ebola in that 2-year time period, and over 11,000 people died. So yes, very terrible. And yet there's a humanity in this, and the more distant voice of the baobab tree, kind of the voice of wisdom looking on. A little bit like the fig tree in Elif Shafak's The Island of the Missing Trees, in that there is maybe a touch of speechifying, but somehow I liked it better from the baobab than I did from the fig tree. I'll have to think about that. Anyway, because I enjoyed this so much, I looked to see what else we had at the library, and that's why I picked up a picture book that Veronique Tadjo did. This one happens to be a dual language, French and English. Both texts were written by Tadjo. She is also a poet and a painter, and so the artwork in here features her original paintings, and she also does touched up black and white photos with added color. And it's the story of a woman in a village who loves children and has her own story also about facing death. There's some African textiles. So very nice collage effect in this book. Grandma Nana. This week is actually Canadian Children's Book Week. So I have just one Canadian children's book to tell you about, Gidus Gift, and it is by Brandon Mitchell, who is Mi'kmaq from Listugouge, Quebec, and the artist for the digital art in here is from Russia, now lives in Canada, Veronica Barinova. And this story is set in contemporary Canada in the Maritimes. It features supernatural elements that are drawn from traditional Mi'kmaq beliefs. So I was a little surprised that at my public library they put it under fantasy. There's a fantasy label on the back. Anyway, a fun story with a different take on dealing with monsters and dealing with thieves. So I actually quite enjoyed Gidus Gift. And next up is another Canadian, a gay cartoonist, Michael Deforge. This story is, it's a collection of short stories. They're all dark, funny, existential. His art is very dramatic. He does not draw realistic characters, people. However, he really gets the social commentary. His stories have this logic all their own. You have to kind of relax into it. It's kind of a psychedelic journey. Let me show you some of the type of the art. So bright colors. There's often lots going on. In between each story, there's pages of solid color, which also add to the attraction of this whole book as a package. It's hard for me to pick a favorite in these short stories. There's one about FBI agent masquerading as an elementary school teacher because there have been deaths in this school, and they know it's one of the children that are committing murder. There's one called New Museum. Here's the first page. Every realist was, at last, maimed, beheaded, or crushed under boulders. No more hand-wringing. We lopped off their hands. There's one called My New Stepdad is a Disgusting Bug and I Hate Him. And he actually does look like an ant, which reminds me of Michael Deforge's debut collection that's called Ant Colony. I highly recommend that one too. Oh, they're just so strange and yet quite wonderful. A little tinge of horror in some more than the others. This one was shortlisted for the LA Times Graphic Novel Prize. The one that won was this one, No One Else by Kikuo Johnson. This one, the author is Asian American, grew up on Maui. That is where this story is set. It's a quiet, kind of a novella. It's a very thin graphic novel about family dynamics, and it's about an adult woman who's been caring for her father for 7 years. He's quite ill and he dies early on, right at the opening. And she's got a son that she's raising on her own, Brandon, and he's, I think, about 4 years old. And her brother comes home from wandering the world, playing music. He's a semi-professional musician. How they get on. So the setting, which is in the Central Plains of Maui, with sugarcane fields all around, is very prominent. There's only 2 colors used in this book, orange and a sort of a slate blue. Darker and lighter shades of both of those colors. It's a very moving story with brilliant use of that orange color. The burning of the sugarcane fields, the orange blanket that plays a part in the story. There's a few flashback scenes, and those have got the pale orange background. It's easy to tell contemporary flashback with that, just simply by the color. Here's an example of the use of the orange in a very dramatic way. Another thing that happens is their cat runs away, so Brandon is looking for his cat, and his uncle helps him with that. Meanwhile, the boy's mother is not coping with the grief by focusing on everything she missed out on while she was busy caring for her father. And so now she's applying for medical school, and that's all that she's focusing on, and the house is going to hell in a handbasket around her. It is really good. A book that I wish would have won, however, is one that I talked about last week on my Friday Reads, and that is Shadow Life by Hiromi Goto and Ann Tzu. I think that one was even better than this one, if I would have been a judge. Just saying. Kikuo Johnson has done a number of New Yorker covers, and you might be familiar with one from last year that was called Delayed, and it showed an Asian mother and her daughter waiting for a train in the subway, both of them looking worried. That expression of the effect of anti-Asian sentiment in the US was just perfectly captured in that cover. Other books that won prizes at the LA Times Book Awards were one that I had really enjoyed that was in the science and technology category, The Disordered Cosmos by Chanda Pressed-Weinstein. I listened to that in audio last year and I thought it was excellent. And a runner-up, or one of the finalists, is one that I'm planning to listen to next week, World on the Wing, a global Odyssey of migratory birds. May 14th is International Migratory Bird Day, so I think I might do a video just about that. Yeah, we'll see. Another book I read this week is a collection of short stories by Rawi Hage, who's a Lebanese-Canadian author. His debut novel, The Niro Game, won the Dublin Impact Award, and it was shortlisted for the Giller Prize and the Giju. He's written a number of acclaimed novels since then. I quite like these short stories. They are pretty melancholy. His writing is exquisite. If you're a person who goes for the best prose, oh, check out Rawi Hage. These stories are mostly of quiet desperation, the absurdity of humanity. He's got protagonists who are eccentric intellectuals and sort of sad, clownish men, dreamy types. And their temperament and peculiar ideas keep them kind of out of step with the rest of society. It's a book that made me think a lot. I recommend it, if that sounds like your kind of thing. One of the poetry collections that I read this month was actually an audiobook read by the author, Ocean Vuong, Time is a Mother. It's very short, it's only 2 hours. I listened to it twice through, and then I went back and re-listened to some of the poems where I had marked passages. Poetry is really great as a spoken art form, so I highly recommend that if you have a chance, listen either to Ocean Vuong's work or other poets' work, especially when they are reading their own. I feel like you get a lot more out of it. So the poems in this book are sad poems about his mother who died of cancer. They are poems with a certain amount of rage about racism that he's faced in the US. Poems about gay love. Yeah, very tender. It's a very tender collection. Another poetry collection is by Warsan Shire, which I picked up just on Saturday and I've already read it. Some of the poems in here were in an earlier chapbook of hers that I had also read. Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth. Oh, I didn't say the title. Bless the daughter raised by a voice in her head. Warsan Shire is Somali-British. I think she lives in the US now. She covers a wide range of very feminist topics in here. I'm going to read you from Bless Grace Jones. Holy Mother of those deemed intimidating, patron saint of the unapproachable, savior of those told to soften their expression, Our Lady of uncomfortable silences, Dame Grace Jones, your daughters, damn their insomnia, turn in their dreamless sleep, a legion of women flinching at touch, fortify them, monarch of the last word, darling of the dark arched brow, we bless you, queen of the cut eye. We lay our burdens at your feet, careful not to weigh you down. From you we are learning to put ourselves first. Yeah. And speaking of learning to put ourselves first, that is what this next memoir is about. It's called 10 Steps to Nanette, a memoirish situation by Hannah Gadsby, and the audiobook is read by the author. She talks about growing up queer and autistic in Tasmania, intersperses her personal experience with current events from the different years as she gets older, and pop culture as well. All of what led up to her life in comedy, and in particular her blockbuster show Nanette, which is I saw the Netflix recording of it, love it so much. I'm going to watch it again soon. Hannah Gadsby calls herself genderqueer in the audiobook. That's the first time I've heard her use that terminology. And she has a lot of grief for her younger self, for her shame and self-hatred, and the way that her own actions, the content of her comedy, making jokes about herself, was actually hurting herself. That's what she realized, and that's the content of the show, Nanette. And I realized that many of the books that I've talked about today are about grief. Some of the poems in Ocean Vuong's book, in Kikuo Johnson, that whole thing really is about grief. In The Company of Men, grief and the Ebola virus. Oh yeah. So, that's my theme for the day. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these, and I will link to With Cindy's video down below, her announcement of the hashtag Asian Readathon. Thanks for watching.